Hello, I'm Ricardo Ortiz, student here at El Paso Community College. Welcome back to another Chef Share, and today we're making Tuscan duck. Okay guys, let's get started. So first, we gotta get a pot going. Obviously we heat it up before we add oil. So we get just a little bit because that duck fat is gonna render out. So you just want just enough to coat the pan. You're not trying to fry the duck, you're just trying to like saute it. So we go skin side down. Lower the heat a little bit. You want it low and slow. And you're gonna let that fat render and you let the skin get really crispy. It's gonna cook about 90% of the way on the skin side, just like the chicken. Anything with skin on the meat, you wanna cook it on the skin side down most of the way because it is a protector. It protects it from getting dry. Since it is a cap of fat, that fat absorbs into the meat and makes it more juicy and less of a dry product. So that's a hack for a chicken as well, because chicken is a very dry meat. Duck, you don't have that problem as much. Add a little bit of salt. About a tablespoon. Now we just let that render for a little bit, and let's start our veg cuts. Gonna move some of this out the way here. Okay, so we're gonna need mirepoix for this sauce, this dish. Mirepoix is 2 parts onion, 1 part carrot, and 1 part celery. Basically like this. So we're gonna make it small dice as well. So as that's rendering off, because it's gonna take about 15 minutes or so, we're gonna start our veg cuts. I like to do the onion last just because it's the messiest. So we'll get our celery stems, cut off the ends and cut off the tips. So I have 2 buckets, one for if you compost, you have a compost bin, and if you don't, you can just have a waste bin, but I have a compost and a waste bin. And celery is compostable. You just cut it down in half. You have about 2 batons like that. And for this, you can make large dice. You just cut it down the row, but since you want small dice, we cut that in half. Make it easier, I just do a half and a half, and then I just cut them in half again this way. A lot of people like to do a slice or a draw. I like to do almost like a pencil drag, like you got a pencil with you and drag it along. So you got a little right here and just drag it down. Let the tip do the work. Slice and drag down. That way I feel like you get more of a consistently straight line that way rather than doing a slice or chop, because humans have the tendency to mess up and roll around a little bit. So straight and just like that. From there you just line them up. And you have your small dice. We just put this in the same container because we're going to use it. So celery. Since we don't need a lot, we're just going to use 1 stem. Okay. We have 1 carrot already peeled and the ends cut off. Obviously, when you're cutting your carrots, you want to peel it and cut the ends off. I like to cut it in sections like that just to practice my, like, what you call bâtonnets, or your matchsticks. I like to just practice that. Your julienne or your So because it's round and you want them squared off, you just cut off the ends like that. And now you have more or less a square to work with. You can still use these for later. These are still, you can probably chop these up. You cut them in a sauce, for scraps. It could just be used for anything. Chop it up, make small dice. But since you want to make it more perfect, you want to be more exact, this is the way to do it, I guess. So from here, I like to do it in half and then half again to make that like perfect square. So right here, once you do it in half, that's more or less a band-aid. And then there, and half one more time, and half one more time. So you have more or less these like slices now. And from there you stack them. That's what I like to do to make my life a little easier. And since it's a little bit, on this way it's a little longer than this way, you do it by 3 instead of cutting it in 4. So, for example, instead of cutting it like the other one, I went in half, I would go in thirds. So 1, 3. So that, for example, how it comes out to 3 of them. And we'll just do the whole carrot. And we can still use these because they're still thin. We can still cut them up like that, like how I said. Same way. They just won't be as perfect, but these are for serving, and this is for like if you're making the sauce anyway, you can still use these up anyway. And you just have your less uniform small dice, but it's still small dice. So because this, as it goes more narrowed down, this one, you only want to do it in thirds now. Like I said, the other one was in half. You only want to do it in thirds. You want that 1/4 inch dimensions. Okay, and from there you stack them. And in thirds. And there we go. And now since we have all our sticks, we can just put them together like this, and the same way we did the celery, and that's the same way you make small dice. So you basically make little matchsticks, and you just cut them into little squares. I'm just going to cut the rest of this, and this I'm going to put into my carrot bin over here. Because you don't want too much carrot. Like I said, it's 1 part carrot celery, 1 part onion, and 1 part celery, 1 part carrot, and 2 part onion. So if you're looking at it through a container aspect, half of it would be the onion, and then the other half would be half and half of carrot and celery. Put this into our container now. So if you can see, it's more or less the same of green and orange. And then the rest of it would have to be onion to make it a full part mirepoix. So this is still cooking off. It is going to take a little bit because duck skin is very thick. Duck skin is almost about 1/3 to a 1/4 inch. So we do want to cook it off to a good amount. And since it's sliding, we know it is already cooked. Like it's getting a good sear to it. It's no longer stuck to the pan. So now we just move it around to not burn one certain side. I like to just spin it a little bit because you know how on pans you have one hot side, and most pans are not equally. If you're working it from a home kitchen, you have one side of the pan that's kind of hotter than the other, so you just kind of flip it around, move it around when it's ready. So just leave it there, and we'll check on it in a little bit. Back to our onion. So as you can see, it's just half an onion with the root still intact. That's how you want to cut it in half. So if the onion would be like this, and that's the root, you cut it directly in half this way. So here's the point. You cut it through the point like this. So if it were to be the full onion, it would look like that. And that's how you were to cut it in half. And that way you still have it intact for when you do your slices and your dices, it's still intact. So here, for example, if you're just doing slices, if you're just doing your julienne, you would go this way. And you see it's still intact. So that way now, you just cut the end off. And you have what you call right here, look, I'm gonna cut one off. You have these little sticks now. So now, you just cut it along this way. Be careful with your fingers, obviously. Don't be like me and cut yourself. And then from there, now as you can see that some of them are coming off, you're gonna get these little cubes now. Cut the end and then work your way down. And look, you could already see from how it looks, it's already getting cubed. So there we have cubes already, small dice. And we just finish off the onion. And if you want to use a full onion like this part, a lot of people throw it away. But if you worked at restaurants and you know you want to use every single little bit of it, here's how you use this little bit. Now you just go this way. And since it's not thick, you just go one time down the middle. And the same thing. And then you can go these. And that's it. And that's how you least amount of waste. You just have the root left. And obviously you're not going to cook the root. So you throw that in your waste bin. All these bigger pieces you can come around and just break them apart. A lot of times they'll break apart anyway because of the layers of the onion. They're just stuck together. So if you just kind of like push them apart, they'll come apart and you'll have your small dice. So now, as you can see, that looked about double of my pile of my carrots and celery pile. So it is going to be an even ratio mirepoix. Put that back in there. And there we go. You see how it's thicker, two parts, 1 and 1, and that's your basic mirepoix. So now that that's done, let's check on our duck. You can kind of see through the edge right here, this little curly part. It's starting to get that crispiness that we want. So let's check on it. It's almost there. It's about 75% there. As you can see, it's getting a nice golden brown color. You do want it a little bit darker, and you want that skin to cook off about all the way. So we'll put it back, crank the heat just a little bit because you don't want it too hot. You don't want to burn the skin. You don't want to also cut it in and still be fat. You want the skin to be like a chicharrón almost, like fully crispy throughout the whole way. Add a little bit of the pinch of salt. So why not? And then for this recipe, apart from your mirepoix, you're gonna need minced garlic. And for minced garlic, if you don't buy it already minced, to mince it, obviously, the easiest way, I don't have any garlic to mince right now, but for an example, just pretend you could just crush it, like that. You put it right here, and just boom, with the edge of your knife, and right here, just boom, a triangle. Walk it back and forth. Another way my chef taught me is like this. If the garlic's right here, like that, if it's already crushed, you can just go right here. And that way you have basically 2 slices instead of that 1 chop. You go here and walk it back and forth. And walk it back. And that way it looks like that. And then spread. Spread. And that's how you make your minced garlic. And it turns into like obviously minced garlic. Another thing you're gonna need for this recipe, but I already had these, are concassé tomatoes, which is just skin off and seedless tomato. So for the tomato, you want to take the skin off and cut it into quarters and take the seeds off. So you're left with these skinless, seedless, skinless tomatoes. And I cut them into the julienne strips. So now we got this cooking. So we got this duck skin almost finishing up. One more little look at it. Oh, we don't want to mess up the duck. So as you can see, it's almost there. We want it a little more golden brown, but it's getting right and crispy and cooking along. Almost that whole fat is almost cooked. On this side, you can see it a little bit, how that fat line is getting cooked almost all the way, but we want it cooked completely because we don't want to bite it and have like a piece of fat that's still not cooked. And as you can see, I only add a little bit of oil and a lot of that duck fat rendered, and that's what we're going to use to cook our vegetables. Apart from this, what else you're gonna need to start your sauce? Red wine. It doesn't need to be a specific red wine. It could be your basic red wine that you have. For me, I'm using boxed red wine because it's the best one to cook with and it's cheaper. You're also gonna need your stock. Chicken stock would work, but for me, because I'm extra, I'm using duck stock. But chicken stock does work fine because chicken stock's everywhere. Best option would probably be to get the less sodium, for that way you can control your salt ratio. So that's basically gonna be your base of the sauce, your red wine and your stock. We're gonna just basically let that reduce and get down. Another thing we have, for me, I have guanciale. The recipe asks for prosciutto. The difference between prosciutto and guanciale is a little bit of a sweeter pork. They're both in the same. They're both very similar to bacon. It's a cured kind of pork. The main difference between this one is prosciutto is a lot more salty and this one's more sweet. It's almost like a honey ham, like a honey bacon, you guess you could say. And for this sauce, because duck is a little bit more gamey, I do prefer the guanciale. You could also use bacon on this one if you can't get your hands on like stuff like that. It's the beauty of it. Cooking is very interchangeable. You just have fun and you can make an amazing dish. And if you don't have duck breast, you can obviously switch this out for a chicken breast. It won't have the same flavor, but it'll be similar. Duck is a little more, like I said, gamey. So if you're not used to that flavor, and if you like more simple, then I guess go with the chicken. All right, I'm just gonna blast it a little bit. Blasting it means basically I turn up the heat, and now because it has all that oil, now I'm basically just frying that skin for it to get nice and crispy. It's about 20 seconds. As you can see, it's getting smoky, so it's getting real hot. And before we put our veggies in, we want to turn down the heat too. We don't want to burn our veggies or our guanciale. Oh, sorry. Whoa. It's running away from me. Oh no. Now that our skin is cooked, we're going to rest it. And we're going to start the rest of our sauce. Rest it this way for you guys can look at that beautiful skin. So now we have our skin. Actually, let me throw it in there for, yeah, we're good. Sorry. Crank the heat back on. We're going to use this same duck fat to cook our veggies. So now that obviously the fat's already hot, throw in your mirepoix. This is a lot, so you could probably use half of it. So about half of the mirepoix. And for after cooking, you want to use that wooden spatula because you're going to have that little bit of burnt on fat or the font on the bottom of your pan. So you want to scrape it off because that oil's already there. You just want to scrape it off with your wooden spatula because the rubber spatula the rubber spatula won't have enough force for you to scratch off these, like you see right here. These brown spots, you just want to scrape it off and incorporate that into the vegetables because that's all flavor. Basically, and it also helps for the cleaning process for you're not scrubbing it down later. And now you basically have almost a clean pan, like there's no meat was cooked there. And you just want to sweat these. You don't want to cook these completely. Sweating them means when you put a vegetable in there and it starts to release its juices and it becomes fragrant. So that's all you're doing. Like when you throw garlic into a pan and it starts getting more juicy and it's not cooked, but you smell it, or like onion, that's what sweating is, or when they become transparent. As you can see, our vegetables aren't cooked, but they're becoming sweaty. Add a little bit of salt. Salt's your best friend in the kitchen. There's a reason why it says salt to taste. Add your guanciale. And we're just gonna let that cook just a little bit. I added the veggies before the guanciale because I do like the veggies just to caramelize just a little bit. That's just my preference. You can not caramelize them or not, but you can put them in at the same time. The recipe calls for putting the guanciale, your pork and your veggies at the same time, but me personally, I like them cooked just a little bit before I put the meat in. As this is cooking, you don't want to put your garlic in until the very last bit, because it's minced, it will burn. So if you put it in with your veggies and your guanciale, it'll burn. So you want to wait till it's at least 50%, or for me, I like to put it till it's 75%, so you get that fresh, like that sweat from the garlic and the caramelization from the vegetables. The best of both worlds. As you can see now, our vegetables are looking a little bit caramelized now. We just want to cook down that pork a little bit more. So now that we got our vegetables a good caramelized and the guanciale cooked, we add our garlic in there for 20 more seconds, just like I said, to give it that sweat. You don't want to burn the garlic. So right there, 20 seconds. Now that's starting to get fragrant. Let's add our white wine, our red wine back in there. And we add our our tomatoes and our duck in there. Let's mix that up a little bit. Skin side up, because you don't want to take away that crispy skin. You just want to finish cooking it in this wine and the sauce. So you want to do that. Basically make a little hole for the duck in the middle and let the wine reduce with the duck in it. And that's it. Now we just let that wine reduce a little bit. Like to turn it up. The hotter it is, the faster it will reduce, but you also have to keep an eye out for it, or else literally if you look away for 1 second, your wine will be gone, your pan will be dry. So reducing it, you're basically trying to just get the sugar and the flavor from it and burn off the alcohol from it. So making almost like a wine syrup. So now you see it's getting nice and thick. It's not the consistency we want, but it's about 80% there. Watch out when we lean it like that. You don't want to get that juice on that skin. Let it reduce a sec, which is basically almost till dry. Now that that's at a good consistency, where it's almost like a syrup, you want to add your stock in there. Your choice of chicken or duck stock. Let it reduce just 2 more seconds. And our stock. And now we just let that reduce down. And you want to pull the duck out at about 135, 140, because that's about the medium-ish temperature, and that's what you serve duck at. You could serve it well done as well if you're not a fan of that, but typically duck is served medium. So now we just let it cook maybe another minute or so, and then I'll check the temperature in the next 30 seconds. So let's look at that cook. As you can see, the sauce is getting nice and thick. It's still very watery, but it's getting very thick. And as you heat it up, as it's boiling, it boils down into that thick consistency, that saucy consistency that you want. And because there's no slurry or roux in it, it is gonna take a little bit longer to thicken up, because like if you do want your sauce to get thick fast, you could make a roux or a cornstarch slurry. That's, you know, but the thing about the cornstarch slurry, it is gonna have that little cornstarchy taste on the back of your mouth. So, me, just might as well just let it reduce on its own. Let's check the duck. Like we said, we wanted 135 to 140. In the thickest part, right in the middle. It's just duck thigh, so we have to find the spot where we're not poking the thigh bone. So there we go. It's a little over, but it's all good. It's at 145. And now we can pull it out and just let it rest. Like a steak, when it's cooked to anything below medium well, you want to let it rest, because as soon as you cut it, all the juices are going to spread out and it's going to dry, and the middle is going to look raw and not cooked. That nice pink cooked and brown, that's when you let it rest, for it doesn't look raw. So now we just let it rest while we let our sauce get nice and thick. We just crank it up, get our wooden spatula, scrape it all off, whatever font we have there. All right, before I forget, we are serving this on a bed of noodles. Let's drop these in. It's our fresh made pasta. And we let that boil for, because it's fresh, only about a minute. All right, now that our pasta is ready and our sauce is almost the consistency we want, we're pulling out our pasta. And I'm just putting it on the plate for it could warm up the plate. You're gonna see what we do in 1 second, so. Little restaurant hack, I guess you could say. So now our plate is warm. We're gonna toss our pasta back in there. Warm plate. And just toss it around. Toss it in that sauce. And like all pastas, it's gonna be a little messy, you know, so no biggie. As long as it's good, as long as that flavor is there. So we're here, you see us nice tossed pasta sauce. We'll grab some of our noodles. Plate them up there. Some with the delicious guanciale and tomatoes in there. Place our duck right there and drizzle on just a little more sauce on it. You don't want to mess up that skin, so just on that quarter that doesn't have skin. Let's wipe this off. So since it is ready to eat, let's put some gloves on. So, a little extra, you know. If they're paying big bucks, you don't want to send them an ugly plate, you know, so. And top with a little bit of Parmesan. Sprinkle it on top. A little more, why not? And there we go. It's our Tuscan duck served on a bed of pasta.